Welcome to the Strategy Skills Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Safarova, and our podcast sponsor today is strategytraining.com. And we have two gifts for you today. The first gift is a book on how to be an effective leader, which I co-authored with some of our amazing clients. And you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/gift. It is firmsconsulting.com/gift. And it is called 9 Leaders in Action. It was a #1 Amazon bestseller. I think you will really enjoy it. And the second gift is McKinsey and BCG winning resume, free download. And that is a resume that got offers from both of those firms. And you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. And today we have with us John Rossman, round 2. John was an early Amazon executive and senior innovation advisor at T-Mobile and Gates Foundation. He's the co-author of Big Bad Leadership and a keynote speaker and advisor. John, welcome.
Chris, great to see you again. Thanks for inviting me back.
So I wanted to start with a few short questions about your career and then move to discussing an important new book you just published. The first question I have for you is, what experience from your career has shaped your approach to leadership and innovation the most?
Well, it's a fair question, but I'm the product of 1,000 little experiences and both successes and cuts along the way and everything. Obviously the time that I spent at Amazon made a significant imprint on me. And I've written about that and talked about that a ton. But honestly, it's been the work since then in delicately applying those lessons, strategies, things to do in helping companies create and reclaim competitive advantage and to innovate. It's all of those little dots connected together. But I think I've just been extremely fortunate to pick a career where, rarely is my goal or the work that I'm doing to maintain the current state or just optimize the current state. It's always about creating the future. And that's what, really I've fallen in love with, and really my mission, which is to help teams and leaders not just optimize for the current business, but to help create the businesses of the future and, reclaim their competitive advantage.
And just to press a little bit more, do you feel there was maybe some defining moment that put you on that path?
Well, yeah. One was, so it was 2012. I had left Amazon in late 2005. I was a partner at a firm called Alvarez & Marsal, really fun firm. Great platform to be a partner on. And my client was the Gates Foundation. And I wrote this one white paper. It was called Future Ready Self-Service. And I sent it to all my clients and contacts. And one of my clients at the Gates Foundation, Greg Shaw, called me into his office and he had the piece and he goes, "This is really good." And then he told me like the 10 things I could have done better with the white paper. He's a journalist by background. And he said, I think Amazon is, this is 2012, before Amazon really started to impact the world like it has. And he goes, "In Seattle, we kind of see this company, but outside of Seattle, we really don't. And I think you do a nice job of kind of capturing and applying what they do. And I think you ought to write a book about it." And so that was really the spark that set me on this journey of writing and trying to capture a story for others to use. It's never about Amazon. It's about you and what you can take from a company like Amazon or others to apply. And so, that relationship and that spark, certainly made a fork in the road for me, and I've taken advantage of the opportunities.
And along the way, if you are willing to share, what is the hardest lesson you've learned as a leader, and how has it influenced your decision making?
The thing I struggle with quite a bit, and the co-author of Big Bet Leadership, Kevin McCaffrey, has pointed this out to me and is a master at this, which is how to keep the main thing the main thing. I easily fall in love with opportunities and things you could go do and everything, but being a bit pickier and a bit more disciplined about where to spend my time and prioritize my efforts has been something that I have to work at along the way. And that is one of the themes of Big Bet Leadership, which is how to keep the main thing the main thing.
I think that is a very common challenge for leaders, especially now with so much noise, so much coming at us, so many urgent requests.
Did you know that the word priority didn't have a plural version of it until like 40 years ago, right? It means the one thing, right? So it's by definition a singular term, but the management consultants, we turned it into a plural word. And I think it is a very hard, but a championship habit of how to say no to a lot of really good things you could do, and to really persecute ideas before you commit to them, and then staying focused on it, right? And that is directly into the theme of Big Bet Leadership.
Definitely. So given that you specifically focusing on keeping the main thing, for our listeners who are struggling with that same thing, because they are leaders, a lot is coming at them, they have so many priorities, it is, I'm sure everyone really enjoyed this thing that you now mentioned, that it used to be a priority. And many of us, it was before even our time. We never were part of that world. What have you learned? What advice can you give for people who are struggling with that same issue?
It's really to scrutinize ideas really well up front before we commit to them. And on a small basis, like you can do that as an individual and as a team, but really Big Bet Leadership is about doing that as an organization before you start pursuing these programs and strategies, right? And so much more, in my experience, so much real experimentation can be done before you really commit resources and start building things. And people don't take advantage of that opportunity to really persecute an idea and debate it and beat it up better. And then if you have a portfolio of these ideas that you're doing this with, then you can better pick the concept that you should really proceed with and lean into. But what tends to happen is we fall in love with ideas. We have a general idea. We have this, fuzziness of a concept that we're going to do, and an organization commits to it, or they're forced to kind of commit to it because of the budgeting process and the way resources get allocated. And then you're starting this journey to nowhere. And that's the start of why so many of these transformations or growth strategies or market repositionings or technology platform replatforms fail, is because we start the commitment process before we really understand either the problem we are trying to solve, our hypothesis about the future state is, or the things that must be true to make that future state happen. And when you don't have those things, I call that the journey to nowhere, right? Like we're just going to be figuring it out along the way. And that's what makes these things such high risk, failure prone initiatives.
And we definitely need to discuss this more, because in the book you mentioned that big bet, whenever companies go after big bets, the failure rate is over 70%. So we'll get to it. Another question I have for you before we move to speaking about your book and the work you're currently doing is, what do you want your team members and colleagues to understand about you that they might not already know?
If you can make the journey fun, like that's half the battle. And I think that these hard business problems, there's an art to being both a disciplined problem solver and a good operator, and to figure out how do you actually make it fun. Because think of it as like an athlete. An athlete doesn't perform their best when they're under stress and strain and their coach is yelling at them and there's all this pressure. No, they perform best when you're in the moment, when you're in the flow, when you're relaxed and you're just focused on the job to be done. And it's the same thing as a team. And what happens in these organizations is like, maybe something isn't going right. Like there's a problem we have to solve. Great. But we can still find a way to make it an enjoyable experience so that we can perform at our best. And I think that's one of the things that I've really learned across my career is how to be both a really good and disciplined operator, but like making it fun in the moment so that people can perform the best.
This is such an important point. We need to talk more about it.
That might be my next book, maybe.
I love this topic. I think it is very important information, very important message for so many reasons, just for so many reasons. That is an important thing to focus on. Life goes so fast. We spend so much time working. We can perform much better. We can think much better. We can come up with much better ideas when we are happy and enjoying versus when we are stressed and we have too many priorities.
One of the concepts I try to employ is this concept of like little victories, right? Like how do we find and celebrate the little victory today while still respecting like, hey, we're trying to solve this hard, important goal or business problem or objective that we're doing and everything, right? So you got to find the little victories along the way. And again, like the goal is to put teams and people at their performance best.
So let's talk about big bet leadership. Let's start with how do you define a big bet and what distinguishes it from regular strategic initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great starting question. So a big bet is any strategy, plan, objective that has both high ambition, but it also has multi-sided risks, it has dependencies, and it has unknown unknowns to it, right? These get called many things within a business. It can be called a market repositioning. It can be called an AI strategy. It can be called a technology platform program. It can, be called a turnaround plan or an operating model strategy, right? But at its heart, it has high ambition, multi-sided risk, and they are distinctly different from an incremental or well understood project or program, something that like, oh, as long as we execute well, we know we should get a certain range of results and we know how to execute these. But these transformations are always, they should be high ambition, but they always have dependencies and risks. And so fundamentally, you have to figure out a way to proceed on them in a truly agile, experimental manner. And that's really what the book is about, is how do you create clarity, maintain velocity, accelerate risk and value, and test these concepts out cheaply, quickly, and effectively before the organization gets committed to them.
Talk to us about how the needs and mission of the big bet are fundamentally different from that of the existing organization.
Yeah, so it's fundamentally different than like your operating rhythm within a business, because in an operating business and when you're planning and budgeting and strategizing like incremental improvements, you have a good basis for understanding how to forecast it, how to understand it. And everybody has a pretty clear vision as to like, oh, well, this is what we're going to create. This is what we're going to do. This is the end point for it, right? Whereas a big bet is fundamentally different. Oftentimes, you don't truly understand what the problem is that we're solving. You all never have a very good understanding of like, what's the future state? Like, how would we imagine this working in an unconstrained manner? Like, what's the future state? And therefore, when you don't understand those things, you can't create an effective path at testing those things out. And, I get asked into a lot of clients to like, hey, come do a QA review or a pressure test of a transformation or of a situation. And fundamentally, I ask three questions. Two of those questions are this, which is, what's the problem we are solving? And what's our hypothesis for the future state? And I'll go individually interview a broad set of team members. A third of the team, of the executives in the team on this transformation journey, they won't even be able to answer those two questions. And the other 2/3, they'll answer the question, but they won't give me just slight variations of the same answer. They will give me markedly different answers to those two questions. And that's fundamentally like, if we can't agree to the problem we are solving and the symptoms of that problem, and we can't agree to, hey, what do we think the future state looks like, then we're not set up to succeed. So that gets to kind of the fundamental framework from the book, which is what we call a big bet vector, right? A vector has 2 points to it, right? our big bet vector has the problem that we are solving and our hypothesis for the future state. And if you can establish that big bet vector, then you can use it over the life cycle of the big bet to, guess what, keep the main thing, right? Like communication and understanding the specific words that matter to keep alignment on something and to make sure that we are actually talking about it is one of the many failure points for why these major transformations fail, which is kind of where you started this question, like, why do these things fail? Well, they fail because we don't all have a common understanding as to the problem we're solving or where we're going.
So what can leaders do to improve their odds?
To improve their so big bets, transformations, they don't fail for one or two easy reasons. They fail for lots of reasons. And so fundamentally, like, that is why we wrote this book, Big Bet Leadership, is because it's easy to make the case, hey, we need to innovate, we need to transform, we need to evolve, we need to grow. That's an easy door to push through. But what's different is, tell me what's different about the job of a senior leader or the teams that support senior leaders. Like, what do we need to do differently when we're approaching these high ambition, high risk situations versus our normal operating business? And that is the gap in the market that we saw. So, the answer to your question is, well, that's the book that we wrote, is that playbook. And we believe that we outlined a set of concrete steps. It's not a methodology, it's a framework, but a set of concrete steps and actions and approaches that help you succeed at these high ambition, high risk transformations. And there's three essential habits that we think big bet legends have, people that are systematically successful on these journeys. They create clarity, they maintain velocity, and they accelerate risk or habit. So those three habits are the habits that we put across a set of tactics and a framework, big bet vector, in order to actually deliver against those three habits. So, that's the summary of what needs to be done.
Can you explain a little more why clarity, velocity, and prioritizing risk and value are essential for big bets?
Yeah. So creating clarity, to some degree, we've already talked about this, which is, if we do not understand the problem that we are solving or our hypothesis for the future state, we are ill prepared to make a commitment and really proceed on this. This thinking is built off of what I think is one of the best pure strategy books written, which is called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And Richard Rumalt talks about, like, you have to have a problem-oriented approach to strategy. You have to understand the crux of the issue and create a hypothesis for how you solve that in a set of tactics. Well, that's essentially what our approach is. But we insert a couple of new things, which is really around defining the hypotheses of the things that must be true in order to get to this defined future state. And we leverage Amazon's working backwards approach, a narrative, write it out and debate it approach. And that is the best, fastest, and cheapest way to actually do experimentation. So that's how we create clarity. Maintaining velocity, a lot of that is about the team alignment and the team that we have running the big bets and the DRI, the directly responsibility, and the senior executive that's responsible for this, as well as like the policies and the environment and the culture that we create in that team. But a lot of it comes down to, guess what? Maintaining focus, right? Keeping the main thing. And so having a small focused team is one of the most controllable factors that you can have. And then the accelerate risk and value is all about kind of this hypothesis experiment driven approach for gaining clarity before we commit. And the biggest disasters on these transformations, like the GE Predix as an example, is where somebody has a good concept, an organization momentum builds up behind it, they commit big to it, but then they have to actually figure it out along the way. And there's no way to deliver against that initial set of expectations. And it means so many things to different people, and diffuse decision making and a lack of a good governance structure. And so fundamentally, accelerating risk and value is to defer out big commitments until we've actually tested these. So it's about high velocity testing of a concept before we commit to it.
We cannot talk about this book without talking about some Amazon principles you shared, and of course, based on your work and being former executive there. So I would love to get your elaboration on certain principles. So first one I wanted to ask you about is, what does it mean for a company to stay in day one, and how does that compare to becoming a day two company?
Yeah, so Amazon and Bezos framing on day one, which first appeared in the 1997 shareholder letter, by the way, and everything, is really a battle cry. It's a form of strategic communication, which is critical. And we outline kind of this type of strategic repeat. We call it the chief repeating officer in the book, way of summarizing like what we are about. But specifically, what a day one company is one that is not trying to optimize for today, but is trying to optimize for tomorrow, and is always going to be leaning forward and taking more calculated risks to build businesses and solutions and customer value propositions that are forward leaning, and investing more in that than just trying to optimize for today's business. And I think it's important. It's an important concept because when companies tend to go from great to good, it's because they have lacked this kind of next horizon innovation orientation, and they underinvest in building out those future businesses. But by the time that you start to see the flattening, then it becomes really expensive and really risky to try to build those next horizon businesses. So the best approach is to have a portfolio of a small set of bets that you are doing early to test these concepts out and find the one that you should invest. So my co-author for Big Bet Leadership is Kevin McCaffrey. Kevin ran new business incubation at T-Mobile. He was my client for 3 years. We built a new business incubation portfolio and approach, which was largely this, like, how do we build beyond the core for T-Mobile? And much of Big Bet Leadership came from the practices, the things that worked and the things that didn't work, in adopting many of these Amazon mindsets into a company that distinctly was not Amazon, did not want to be Amazon, but needed kind of this day one tactical approach applied to them.
When you work with clients and helping them adopt this kind of mindset, where do they struggle?
Big question. One of the areas that they struggle with is truly digesting what does innovation and experimentation mean. Most senior executives are operators, right? They see a problem, they make a plan, they make a commitment, they execute, and they deliver. Whereas a transformation and an innovation is fundamentally the flip of that, which is you have to truly understand that most things start from a basis of failure and test their way to a success. And so that is one of the fundamental concepts and kind of just core belief systems that honestly many senior executives can never get over, because it kind of feels like we're not executing well or we're wasting time and money on this. And it comes across in all these small and subtle ways. And then what happens is the teams that are on this innovation program or on this transformation program, they sense that, they know that. And so they're smart. They pull back. So they de-risk the endeavor by lowering the ambition. And that takes it into a purely incremental approach to this. And so that's the doom loop of kind of short-termism, incrementalism that is not fundamentally transformative in nature. So that is one of the fundamental ways that senior executives struggle with this is they think you should be able to plan these journeys pretty well. One of the stories and examples I share is really about, this concept of guided wandering, right? And again, in business and in life, like you can, most people can, see a situation, they can plan it, they can execute it, but big discoveries and big new businesses are not that way. It's more guided wandering. It's not random, but it's difficult to predict exactly how it's going to happen. And I tell the story of the Amazon marketplace, and that business, that was actually the third attempt at a third party selling business at Amazon. There was lots of naysayers, not just external naysayers, but internal naysayers. But Bezos was kind of, committed to the strategy, flexible on tactics. And so like, hey, we're going to take another crack at this. And it took a lot of patience and a couple of other big bets. The two I'm thinking of are Amazon Prime and Amazon FBA that were no place on our roadmap when we launched the marketplace business in late 2002. But it was the combination of those three strategies and some patience that allowed the marketplace to be, one of the world's most disruptive and famous business models ever, right? Over 60% of all Amazon units shipped and sold are marketplace units. It's the business that gets Amazon in all sorts of regulatory problems because it's so dominant. And I think that is a struggle for, again, many companies, is to truly understand that the nature of kind of guided wandering.
Talk to us about thinking in outcomes.
Yeah. So the first chapter of the book is about thinking and outcomes. And what it is, it's about unconstrained thinking. And it focuses on just establishing this notion of a big bet vector. Tell me what the problem is. And most importantly, like, describe in detail what the future would look like. How would it operate? Why would a customer love it? What would be the key operating outputs of it? Don't worry about how you're going to get there. We will worry about it, but in due time. So it's kind of this unconstrained thinking. And what is so hard for teams to do is to put aside those constraints and to really articulate, like, if we were starting from scratch, like, how would this product, service, operations work? Like, what is the input and the output that we would want to? What's the job that the user is actually trying to get done? And it forces us to dig deeper, have better empathy, better understanding of the entire customer journey and environment. And it leverages this Amazon writing narrative, working backwards approach in order to do it. So that's the quick story of thinking and outcomes.
Anything else that you wanted me maybe to ask you and I didn't, or anything else you want to share about the work covered in the book?
Well, two things. First, it's like, why did we write this book? And I kind of touched on this to begin with, but the book starts with kind of defining, the subtitle of the book is Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyper Digital Era. And the preface of the book is like, what's the hyper digital era? And the simple answer to that is that if you think that this past 25 years of digital disruption and digital transformation has been impactful, you're not ready for what the next 25 years offer. And the ability to actually be not just a great operating company, but a company that is systematic about how it reinvents itself, that is going to become the core capability that separates the winners versus the losers of this coming hyper digital era. And we have to get good at that as operators in our business, but we're not today, right? And so why is that? And that's why I think this book is important. Not that we nailed it completely, but I think we actually give a really good set of tangible actions to be done that help senior leaders do a really important aspect of their job, which is the ability to actually transform and change and grow a business. So that's why we wrote the book and why we think it's important. And then the second is really captured. Each chapter, I have a quote that I think kind of captures the essence of the chapter. And chapter 4 is called "Think Big and Bet Small." And the quote, I think, captures like the fundamental challenge that as humans and as business leaders we have. And it's from Michelangelo, which is he was a 15th century artist and Renaissance man. And he says this: the greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. And I think that captures the constraint-based orientation that most businesses and most teams, and there's a few companies out there, Amazon's the one that I know best, but not the only one, that has this notion of solving big, important problems and has the guts and the guile in order to actually invent and create something new. And I think that is the path that more companies need to take up, and we need them to take up.
We started our discussion today talking about how you were working on making sure that you focus on the main thing. So I want to wrap up our discussion today with advice you got from Jeff Bezos that you mentioned in the book. Don't let simple things become the hard things. Only let hard things be the hard things. Can you elaborate on that advice?
Yeah. So that was a great moment, and Jeff was giving myself and Neil Rossman a lecture about how we had allowed the simple things in the business to become the hard things in the business, but only good leaders really only let hard things be truly hard things. And simple things tend to be the things that are within our control, but because of an organization or because we're trying to get along or because of these artificial constraints, we actually let them become the hard things. The truly hard things are either sometimes inventing technology or getting sales, getting partners, getting people to commit external to the organization. Like those are truly the hard things that have to be done. And it was his way of telling us, your title might be Director of Merchant Integration, but I want you to act like you run the whole business. And he was saying this not to us, but to the entire organization. And when it came to the marketplace, he was saying like, hey, John and Neil, like you guys should operate like you run the whole business. And so he gave us permission to do a better job at running that business. And big companies, it doesn't even have to be a big company, any company, they have an uncanny ability of letting the simple things become the hard things. And those are policies, decision-making speed, how we apply resources, all of these constraints that really are fully within our control. And so I've used that line, that logic, that story dozens of times with my clients to help them like, we're the ones that are making this hard, not the market, not the competition, not our customers. We're the ones that are making this hard. I think we can do better than this.
John, thank you so much. I always enjoy our discussions, and you have so much knowledge, wisdom, and you're so generous. You sharing your advice and experiences. Where can our listeners learn more about you, buy your books, anything you want to share?
Yeah, so Big Bet Leadership's at Amazon, and it's a beautiful hardcover book, nice Kindle, really great audio experience. It comes with a bunch of free tools. You can get those at bigbetleadership.com, whether you read the book or not, but it's helpful to read the book. And you can find me on LinkedIn, John Rossman, super easy, or johnrossman.com.
Our guest today again has been John Rossman. Check out his book. It's called Big Bet Leadership. And our podcast sponsor today is strategytraining.com. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, you can get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies. It's a free download, and you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. And it is firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. You can also get McKinsey and BCG winning resume, which is a resume that got offers from both of those firms. And you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to connect with you all next time.